The whole purpose of this class is to try to put as much knowledge and as much current experience. Can we start?
I just got an email that says I won $1 million, so I thought I should leave.
So he doesn't need to do it anymore.
That's what I showed him. I don't need to be here.
So we're hoping that, especially some of the newer ones, that we can cram a lot of years of knowledge, and I think me and Lance have a combined 53 years to try to put that into you. So when you're out in the workforce, you're as seasoned as any agent that's out there that you're competing against. I know putting this together, even at 23 years, I learned some things. We're going to kind of go in depth of these forms and what they mean and what they actually say, in case you haven't read all of them, which most of you probably have not, line by line. And then we'll go over a quick way about how to summarize them for your client, okay? So today we're going to start with the buyer's brokerage agreement. We're going to work our way through the purchase agreement, and if that probably takes us through the class, we'll start next week with subject to sell addendums, and all that other stuff. Okay? All right? So on that note, there's a couple of things to know about the buyer's point agency agreement. First of all, when I'm sitting down with somebody, there's really only one contract you're working with, and that's the purchase agreement. Everything else is a disclosure, and that includes the buyer's appointed agency agreement. So I always start out saying this is disclosure, not a contract. Okay, it's important to know what needs to be in this form. You need to have the address of the property that they're writing the offer on at the top of this form. Okay, your name needs to be filled in on the second page, and the two boxes on the second part need to be checked. Now, they used to be checked automatically when you got in the dot loop. We may change that back to that.
It's being changed.
It's being changed because we're so used to it automatically being checked that you're consenting to dual agency and that. And we're going to go over, because a lot of people think they check that box, they actually consider dual agency. That's not the case. We'll go over that. Roman numeral number 1. Do we have the form coming up here? The actual. Can we actually put the form up? Mm-hmm. Yeah. There we go. I just need my notes here. Okay. So it's important to say when you're going over appointed agency is another word for representation, and I think that strikes home with people a lot more than appointed agency. They don't. I just say agency is another word for representation, and our brokerage has 3 different types of representation. I don't go over the whole real estate industry. We're not saying what other brokerages do. This is what our brokerage does. We have 3 different types of representation. Roman numeral number 1 goes over appointed agency. And this is when you as the agent are acting solely for your client or your principal. Okay? Why it says the agent is because we all know that the brokerage might be representing both, right? Kathy could have a listing. I'm bringing the buyer. The brokerage is representing both parties, but I'm going to act for my client's interest exclusively. Does that make sense? Single agency is actually when the broker and the agent is representing the client solely. If you're writing an offer and it's an Iowa Realty listing or an outside brokerage, that's the case. Okay? And of course, dual agency is when the broker and the agent is representing both parties. Okay, and for those that don't know, there's a separate form of dual agency that we will cover that needs to be signed by both parties. Okay. Again, we're diving into this form deep, so you guys know what it is. When you explain this to your client, we'll have Lance kind of do a summary of this. You can make it just a 30-second little bit. You don't have to read every line to them, but they do need to understand the 3 different types of agency. Okay. Roman numeral number 2 goes over how you have to place your client's interest above any other interest, including your own. Okay? You have to disclose all material information to the client. Now, a material information is any information that would impact someone's decision to buy or what to buy it for. So we have a lot of gray areas in real estate, stigma properties and those type of things. You're the one that has to make the call inevitably whether or not that information should be disclosed if it would affect their decision to buy. If you believe it would, then that's a material adverse fact that you need to disclose, okay? Use reasonable skill and care. And I want to go into this for most agents because we have a lot of technology at our disposal that has made our jobs a little easier with Dotloop. And a lot of you have gone out there and you're with clients and you're talking about offers and you highlight the important stuff. What's the purchase price going to be? What's the closing date? We're going to put an inspection time on there, put a home warranty, and these are the appliances you want. I'm going to send you the forms. Click, 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 sign. Is that using reasonable skill and care? Are there other points to a contract other than the 5 I just mentioned? You're going to find yourself in trouble if something on that purchase agreement comes up that you didn't go over with them. You know, someone's going to look at you and go, you're a professional in this industry. You did not use reasonable skill and care. So although Dotloop is a nice instrument, you can be on the phone with them, they can be on their computer, you can be on your computer, and you should be going over every line of the purchase agreement, which we're going to go over. We're going to go over every line of the purchase agreement, and then we'll have Lance summarize the whole thing like he was presenting me an offer. Okay? Roman numeral number 3 goes over how we're going to act with honesty and good faith. Disclose material facts, which we went over, and it also gives you permission to collect earnest money, collect monies for, let's say there's propane usage, and collect money, and they give you the general authority to make sure those get delivered, okay? Roman numeral number 4, it has the line of where you're going to put your name in there, right? Let's go to the second page. It's important, like when Frank's writing an offer for us, or Jeff's writing, or Chance is writing an offer for Shane, Shane's name and Chance's name need to be in here. Not just the agents that's writing the form, okay? Because Shane and Chance, whether their relationship, you know, they may be giving specific performance to that buyer. Whoever can give specific performance or some kind of representation needs to be in that box, okay?
Is there a limit as to how many agents can be in that box?
No.
No. If there's my kind of rule of thumb, brokers speak up if I'm wrong, but if someone's getting compensated for the sale of, they should be in that box.
And it doesn't even have to matter about compensation. The only name you don't have to put in there is mine, because I am an agency for every client that the company has. So I can assist without compensation and work with people. But anybody that has the chance to interact with a client has to be on there.
So I should be putting Jess on there.
Now, if Jess does
Licensed.
anything that is licensed.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
If there's a licensed person and they are giving anything that a normal licensee would do, yes.
I would go a step further and say, even if they're not specifically involved in that transaction, just teams, for example. In theory, everyone should be listed out that's on that team that might carry information in a meeting or whatever maybe. There are other states surrounding us right now where it's actually become a mandatory thing. And it's a separate document that's required for that. We're not there yet, but it could be.
So Roman numeral number 5 is just showing that it's your obligation to fulfill the duty set forth in Roman numeral number 1 and number 2, and that's the disclose the material defects, act with reasonable skill and care, those type of things, okay? Roman numeral number 6, look at that. These are the boxes that will be automatically checked. The buyer with this is not consenting to do aging. They're consenting to show them properties that are listed by you, okay? Roman numeral number, where we got 7 goes over the possibility of separate representation. Now this happens where you get a buyer, they called you on your listing, their sign, you show them the property, especially with attorneys, right? All of a sudden they want to make an offer on this property, but they feel uncomfortable if you represented both parties. You can come to Lance or I, Shane, and we can appoint somebody to represent them. And I've done this personally before where, you know, went to an agent and said, hey, do you want to represent this client and for 20%? You know, you can still capture the bulk of the commission or whatever you decide is where both agents decide is fair. Okay, whatever you agree to. But there are some buyers, possibly some sellers that are very uncomfortable with the dual agency situation, okay? We're gonna go over the dual agency form, either this class or the next class, depending on the time crunch. And you should know what is required of a dual agent, what they can do, what you can't do, and what you must do. That's what the dual agency forms go over. Roman numeral number 8, this has come up quite a lot with a lot of agents, and this is something that does happen if you're in the business long enough. You may have this is disclosing to the buyer that you may have another buyer that's interested in the same property they are, and you can represent that buyer. Okay, that's what it's disclosing to them. Remember, it's a disclosure. So that does happen if you've been in the business long enough. It's kind of a tough situation to be in. Have you ever had 2 buyers that you're representing writing an offer on the same property? Well, remember, you can't disclose from one, you can't take preference over one buyer or the other. And whether what buyer's family, you can't tell what the other buyer's offering. But this disclosure goes over how this could be a real possibility, okay? Roman numeral number 9 goes over how you'll be compensated, and that's most likely from the listing broker, okay? That's very short and sweet. Roman numeral number 10 just says you're the real estate agent, you're not their tax advisor. You're not to advise them in legal matters and those type of things, okay? And then, where are we at here?
11, consent to appoint.
Yeah, and the last one is them actually appointing you to be their agent, okay? There is a little line here on the bottom that gives the brokerage the right to prepare the documents like the groundwaters and things like that, okay? But that's the actual buyer's appointed agency. Now, you don't want to be going through an offer and spending 2 hours explaining every line of every form, so you got to learn how to summarize this. And I'll go over the way I summarize it real quick, and Lance will go over the way he summarizes it. When I sit down with a person, I say, hey, this is a disclosure of agency. This is a disclosure of agency is another word for representation. These are the 3 ways our brokerage handle representation. We have appointed agent will represent you, and the broker will represent me solely on your behalf. Number 2 is dual agency, and that's either relevant or not relevant. If it's relevant, then you can go over, get out the dual agency form and go over what dual agency means. And the 3rd one just says that if we show property that's listed by my brokers, the brokerage will represent both parties, but us as individual agents would represent your interest individually. Does that make sense? I know I kind of said that fast. I go over the 2nd page. I go over it real quick, saying by signing the 2nd page, you're actually appointing me to be your agent. Very short and sweet, okay? Maybe shorter and sweeter than most would like, but I don't try to spend too much time on the form. I let them know if we're writing an offer, what type of representation we're running into. I've even gone sometimes in circle which one. Let them know whether I'm representing you, brokers representing you exclusively and I am, or whether it's a Remax Concepts listing and the brokerage is representing both parties, or whether it's a dual agency situation, okay? Very short and sweet. Lance, what do you want to add back?
Okay, real quick. Matt, this is how we do things around this area, and specifically at our company. We do a thing that's called appointed agency. There's different kinds of agencies. Specifically, we do appointed agency. Appointed agency is when the broker, per your request, appoints me to work specifically for you in a transaction. Here's how that works. When it comes to anybody's interest, yours is paramount. It's paramount to mine, it's paramount to companies. I hold you up above everybody else in the transaction, and that's how we work together. Through this, it gives you some ideas of how that appointed agency works. And so we talk about things that you need to know. You know, the things about the property that I can find out, I need to share with you. Things that I can see in the property that maybe you wouldn't, I share with you. Information that comes across that I find out from other parties, I share with you. So everything I know, you know. That's how it works, because I only represent you in the transaction, no matter whose listing it is, unless that's my listing. Then we go into a thing called dual agency. Dual agency is where I'm holding you up above, per this agreement, everybody else out there, including me and my company. Dual agency means I've made that same promise to the listing, the owners of the property. So I stick them up here and they're above me, my company, and anybody else. Here's the deal. You guys are on the same level playing field above everybody else, and I cannot raise one of you higher than the other one in the process of that. So all information that's available will be available to both of you, but information that is garnered through meeting or talking with either specific party about the transaction is not shared with one another. That would be an unfair advantage and one that you wouldn't have if it wasn't my listing. So you gain no advantage, but you gain no disadvantage of working as a dual agent. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So you can see on here, there's a lot of things about what we do. The big thing is I tell you everything. I make sure that your money and your properties and things like that are done. I advise you about the pitfalls that go along in the process of the transaction. Work just for you as things go along. Comfortable?
Yep, meaning that they signed the form, they're appointing you as the agent.
Yep, that's the
So-
last line.
Does everybody kind of get the gist of that? Agency is another word for representation. Okay? It's important for a buyer or a seller to know who they can trust, who's going to hold it in confidence, okay? Who's representing their best interest.
I have a question.
Yes.
So in an ideal world, if you have a buyer, you have them sign this first. I'm not going to show you houses until you sign this. So if they do it, every time we had a client last spring who we had to put 7 offers through before we finally got an accepted one. Do they have to sign this every single time we offer? Or
Every
can it
single
just
time
be
you
signed-
offer, yes, because the representation could change with who has the listing, okay? It could be a delinquency on the 5th offer, might have been single or appointed with the 1st. You don't have to have that signed before, prior to working with them,
Right.
if you don't want to, okay? But yeah, the address up here
Right.
needs to be on the property, so you don't take one that's already signed and just change the address.
Right.
Okay, because you might have explained that, they might have understood that you and the brokers are representing them exclusively when they signed that other offer. Now that's changed. Now there's a dual agency situation, or the brokerage has
Right.
both listings. You're still gonna, even when the brokerage has both listings, like Lance mentioned, you are responsible to hold that client's interest above your own. And the listing agent, the appointed agent, has the same duties to the seller, but the brokerage
Right.
holds everybody up in the same playing field. If you're always fair, and you're always honest, and you always disclose, and you always, the material, you use reasonable skill and care, you're gonna be in good shape, okay?
Don't get mixed up by fair. Fair doesn't mean you're not in competition. And I don't use fair myself. It was taken out of NAR's code a number of years ago because being fair is a whole bunch different than being honest. So fair is a kind of a crazy word that people assign. And it doesn't work in our business very well.
All right, we're gonna move on to the purchase agreements. How many people here have read the purchase agreement line by line? Line by line, every word of the purchase agreement. Okay, good. I think sometimes we get addendums from the builders, and we get addendums from the REO people, and we just say, oh, this is just standard, just click, sign. Listen, read those addendums before you have anybody sign them, okay? It sucks if you have 3 to 5 page addendum, but that's your job, okay? You click, sign, and then all of a sudden something comes up on that addendum and they lose their earnest money, or on next thing, no, they're paying $100 a day for every day they didn't close because you didn't disclose that to them. Have you used reasonable skill and care as a professional? No. The answer is no. So as much as it pains people to read, we have to get through it. Now, first thing to know about the purchase agreement is there are built-in contingencies in the purchase agreement already. Now, contingencies are another word of, this offer is subject to this happening, okay? The first one is financing. For better or for worse, we got a built-in contingency in here of financing. The type of financing you put in here, whether it's FHA, 3.5% down, conventional 80% down, that is what you are saying this offer is subject to them qualifying for that type of loan. Okay? So that's the first built-in contingency, and we're gonna go over the whole thing. The second one, if you check the box, is appraisal. Now, a mortgage company will lend on purchase price or appraisal price, whichever is less, whichever one's less. If you have a purchase agreement for 150 and the property appraises at 160, they're okay loaning on the 150. However, if it goes the other way, we have a purchase price of 150 and it only appraises for 140, they're only going to loan on the 140. Okay, it is essential that if your buyer is getting financing, to have this box checked. If you're in a multiple bid situation and they're offering more and more and more, I would have a conversation about this box being checked. If it doesn't appraise, we go back to renegotiation. Okay, and you don't have to. Unfortunately, the way this is, it's contingent upon the property appraising. Okay, it doesn't really say anything about the renegotiation if it does not. But that typically is what happens, typically. Okay, some kind of compromise is reached between the seller and buyer. If someone's offering cash, you can still check that box and say, I still want to make sure that I'm going to independently hire an appraisal and make sure it appraises. You can put that contingency in there. Some cash buyers, they're certainly not required by the lender, though. There's no lender involved. Does that make sense? Title opinion. Why is a title opinion done? Anybody?
Clean,
Merchantable, marketable title, right?
no liens.
Now, the reason why title opinion is done is because liens are prioritized by the date that they're filed. That's why your buyer at the closing table signs the promissory note, and all that stuff's taken right down to the recorder's office for filing. And that lender files that lien against the property. When they file that lien against the property, they're first in line to get their money. That's why they do title opinion. Make sure all the mortgages are paid, all the taxes are up current, there aren't any small claims against them, no mechanics lien, no IRS liens, no back child support, no secondary loans. All that's got to be clean so the mortgage company can put their lien on the property first. Okay? It doesn't matter the amount of the money or who the debtor is. It's whoever files first. Now, the only caveat to that is the IRS. The IRS is going to get theirs. Okay? They leapfrog everybody. And if you've ever been in trouble with the IRS, you know what the hell I'm talking about. Right?
I don't know. But
You don't know what I'm talking about.
As far as you know.
So that's why a title opinion is done. And if this is cash purchase, does a title opinion have to be done? No. Would you be stupid not to do one?
Yeah.
Yes. So we have a lot of cash purchases out there. In fact, I don't know what the numbers are. I know 2 years ago, it was more frequent to see cash purchases than it was FHA. Protect your buyer by a title opinion. It should be rendered, and we need to make sure all the liens are off of it. So when you're a seller, even though they're paying cash, goes to sell it, we know we have clean, marketable title. Another contingency is court approval. And that's if it's an asset of an estate, trust, or conveyorship, okay? If someone passes away and this property was left to an heir, the courts have to open up that estate to determine who the legal heir is and who can legally pass title down, okay? If you're working with the state or listing a state, or if you're working with the buyer and you're filling this out, make sure they know, and you need not to ask the listing agent, has this gone through probate? If it hasn't, it's going to take a little while. You need to let your buyer know that, hey, we can get this property. We might not be able to close in 30 days. This has to go through the systems. Just make sure that the property is being sold at really close to fair market value. That there's nothing that's under, that the executor who's been appointed to take care of this sale is not undercutting the other heirs. Okay? Cutting them out. So the courts do need to review the purchase agreement. They have a very quick hearing. If it's already been through probate, the estate attorney will get a copy of that purchase agreement. They'll submit it to the courts right online. It's not even like the hearing's done. It's right online, and they approve it. Now we can go forward with the regular sale. It is a built-in contingency in this offer. Okay?
Hey, Matt?
Yes.
Can I go back to the title? Is that built into the contract too, right?
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's, doesn't matter if it's cash or whatever, it's
Right.
built in.
Right. So One that I don't have it in here, I don't know if I would definitely define it as a contingency, but it is the seller's responsibility to provide an abstract. They can't find it, it's on them, and it's in the contract that they have to have one created. We cannot sell property in Iowa without an abstract. And inevitably, somewhere in your long career, there's gonna be someone that says, well, I never had an abstract. Impossible. Impossible, okay? And an abstract is something that, we're only like one of 2 states in the union that do
We're
this.
down to one.
Well, we're down to one.
We're at.
We're the last one left. Okay, and from what I hear, the abstract and the title opinions are better than the title insurance. Because the title insurance just is gonna put an insurance policy on the title, whereas title guarantee is actually, we've done the searches to make sure at this point in time, there was nothing on the title, okay? But the abstract is just a chain of title, that's all it is. Goes over, shows whether or not you paid a lien off, shows the mortgage being paid, and it goes all the way from 1868 all the way to today. So here's well, my home was built in 1950. We didn't need 1868. Well, at some point in time, it was part of a large farm, and it's been parceled down. So eventually your home was built, and it's been sold 7 times since then, and it shows every owner, okay? To make sure the correct chain of title has been given. There's no break in it, okay? So an attorney does not have to go back from 1868 and search. They just go back to the last time title opinion was rendered, knowing there was clear title and moving forward, okay? So let's go over some contingencies that can be added. Inspection is the most common one, right? I see a lot of people asking me these days, like how many days should we go for inspection? Well, when the market's hot, you want to give your inspectors are busy, so you want to give yourself a little bit more time. But I remember when 7 days was the average, and now it seems to be more like 10 business days. And everybody says, well, when the inspector's in there in day 2, you know, when do I got to give the inspection report? You have all days that you negotiated. All 10, because you might get multiple inspectors in there. You might need one for the fireplace, you might need one for the sewer, you know, you might need to bring in a basement guy. So you have all those 10 days to figure that out, and you can, you know, extend that through what we'll get to with, you know, addendum versus amendments and things like that, okay? If need be, if there's an agreement between the seller and the buyer.
Don't piecemeal your inspection addendums.
That's a great point. A lot of people will have the inspection done one day. We know the radon's not coming back for 48 hours, and they're gonna go ahead and deliver what they have on the inspection time, negotiate all that with the seller, and then, oh yeah, by the way, 2 days later, I need a radon mitigation. That does not work well. Get all of the information in, and then produce your inspection.
See,
addendum.
I've had things where though, you know, you want them working on it, so you want to get that inspection addendum, you know, or that inspection to them right away.
There's nothing wrong with calling the agent and saying, hey, you know, we're not done with our inspections and
But
stuff,
here's
but
some
just let you
things
know,
instead
there's
of
this and this.
trying to compile.
Yeah, tell them, hey,
I
we're
got
still
it.
waiting on the radon too. That way they don't think you're done,
Mhm.
and then you're coming back with something else, okay?
Like if you send me an inspection addendum, your response is going to get that is the end of the
That's
inspection period.
Okay.
That's how it works. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I happened yesterday at open house. I had an inspector come through, give me goodies, whatever, and we got to chatting, and he said, that would you like say maybe a good thing or a bad thing, if like an agent or maybe a seller wants to get a pre-inspection done.
Best thing
It's
ever.
kind of like a little package deal.
I think it's the best thing ever.
A lot of people do.
Do it
A lot of
on,
people do that.
do it on every listing. Mhm.
Okay.
Do it on every listing. And the reason for that, and it costs money because, you know, the agent
Yeah.
pays for it typically. Seller can, depending on what you're negotiating. But the idea behind that is that if you have it pre-inspected and you make that inspection available, which I put it right on so that the second that you make an appointment, it gets shipped to you, email along with the disclosures and radon tests and everything else. But when you do that, the buyer gets that information up front. And so both the buyer and the seller know it's been inspected. There's probably not going to be anything major. Even if you want to do another inspection, the likelihood is that maybe they find some little thing here and there. But I got tired of doing 2 negotiations for every sale. because it doesn't make any sense to negotiate crazy good and work hard and everybody does their thing and maybe the buyer's very emphatic about what they're gonna pay and like that. And then a week later, you get an inspection report and the buyer's like, well, I want all this done too. We're like, whoa, no, that's not how it's gonna work. We're gonna negotiate once up front. That's it.
So that, go ahead.
Sorry, is there a downside then to having to disclose then everything that's found on the inspection?
If you give me the inspection report, then it's disclosed.
Right, well, so if, we'll say you went into a
So
situation where maybe someone
What
did
would be
wanna.
your hope?
Right,
That they're not gonna do an inspection?
I don't know, I've
Always.
just ran into that, well, if they get an inspection beforehand, then you have to disclose everything. Or I've had that feedback where it's, well, maybe an inspection's negative or to do that
Which is
beforehand,
exactly
but-
what's gonna happen when the buyer
yeah.
does the inspection.
I would say it's just, I'm not a guy that goes through and does the inspections, but I certainly understand the philosophy.
Right, yeah.
Because the exact scenario he painted, I think I deal with every house, it's like, okay, you got $10,000 off price, now you want me to put in radon and everything else?
Exactly.
No. Let's go back to the full price offer and then we'll do everything. Well, no, we're not doing anything. I like his philosophy on that.
It's surprising, sellers and buyers both really like it. They both really like it. Cause up front, and they know, it's like, they're gonna come in and go, we got this, this, and this, and we're like, whoa.
Especially if you have like, let's say GFCIs don't work, then the seller goes and fixes them before, after the inspection, has them done and they're ready to go. So I like that a lot. I forgot you guys used to do that.
It to me, it's a very good thing. It takes a lot of stuff. We do radon right up front. And here's the bottom line. If it's got a 20, you're gonna do radon. That's it. It's just gonna happen. But I have sold houses with 8.5 radon. Told up front, it's 8.5. That's in the basement and there's no bedrooms down there. We're not doing it. Right up front. Surprisingly, buyers go, oh, okay, well, it's not that bad. After the fact, you get a 4.7, they want radon. That's just how it works. So that's why I do everything up front. That's just personal, but that's how we've always.
Well, that's what we're here to share with you what we personally do, and you guys can put it in your business or not put it in your business.
Would it be the expense of you?
No,
Huh?
no.
You pass that
No,
expense on to someone, what are you trying to
It
do?
depends on what you're doing.
You're talking about the mitigation.
The mitigation, though, is
No,
that's sellers.
that's seller.
But as far as the inspections go, I was not much of a commission reducer. So I would typically pay for those things up front. The only thing that would happen then is if you then decide to cancel your listing with me before our listing period is up, which is 6 months, then you're gonna pay that money back. Because I'm not gonna spend
No.
$800 and,
Right.
have you move on.
Now, as a seller, and you get an inspection request, you should try to respond within 48 hours from the time that you get the request. There are times where someone's asking you to do something when you need to get a bid. And you should just convey that information to the buyer's agent and just say, hey, listen, we're having a roofer coming out and they're not able to get, it's Monday. We're not able to get them out until Friday. Can we prolong our response until then? Because it's not, you never want to get your seller to agree to a whole bunch of stuff, but they don't know what they're agreeing to price-wise. That could be dangerous. You're quoting something and all of a sudden ends up being 3-4 times the amount.
Probably have inspectors that you have go-tos for, but I've noticed 3 different ones now will basically do an inspection on the house and just talk with the seller and you for less price too. Most of their time is taken up doing that report, so that could even be something too. Hey, $100 here or there. I don't know what they would quote you, but let's just walk through so that you know what might be coming on an inspection report.
You
Then
can do
there's
that.
more of a peace of mind if you're worried about that disclosure aspect, at least the seller's prepped.
Yeah, the problem is that as soon as the seller gains knowledge of anything, it is then disclosable, whether it's in writing or not, by law. As soon as
And you
say-
don't have a report to pass on to the buyer to give them that
Right.
warm, fuzzy peace of mind.
Assuming
feeling,
that they would do an inspection.
Right,
well, yeah.
So.
And the thing is, if just the seller knew it and they didn't disclose,
Mhm.
that'd be on them. But if you knew that the seller didn't disclose, now you're required by law to disclose.
Okay, I see what you're
And
saying.
no doubt, if you work with one inspector well, and you say, listen, I want to do this in my listing now, and we do up and up umpteen listings a year, and I'm gonna, they might give you a better deal on that. Anyway, you might want to negotiate a better deal than their normal buyer fee, knowing that you're gonna call them on every listing.
Just to call out, we're talking about filling out this in the inspection period. In our purchase agreement, it is 2 calendar days for response from buyer to seller and seller to buyer. That is different than 48 hours.
Yeah, you're right.
So just make sure you understand the differences. If you have 48 hours and I tell you at 5 o'clock today, you have 48 hours from 5 o'clock today. If you have 2 calendar days and I tell you at 5 o'clock today, your first day is tomorrow.
And that day would be up at midnight the following day then, right?
So it's not 48 hours. It starts at midnight and it's the next day and the next day through to midnight. So be aware, and it's different in different purchase agreements. So especially when you're with a seller and they're getting agreements from different companies, be aware that some say 48 hours, some have 48 for one and 24 for the other, I think I've seen. And some do calendar days like we do. So know the difference.
So if the seller does an inspection first, then at closing, do you have to do another one, or is that?
It's still up to the buyer. They might not, the seller might do an inspection and they write the offer subject to an inspection, and the buyer feels like they want to hire a different inspector for their own.
Totally fine.
It's up to them. They may look at that inspection and feel comfortable with it and then waive their right. I very rarely see people, unless you're an investor, waive your right to an inspection.
Yeah.
I bet you Lance, having done what he's done, you probably would get him to waive.
No, you don't get them too much there. What you'll do is have them come with an inspection in. You make sure they have the inspection. Some places, inspectors will give a buyer walkthrough for less money off of that. So you use the same inspector. They'll give a buyer walkthrough and talk to them about a few things, and they'll do it for like $100. And, just a quick walkthrough, that all the paperwork's already done. They just explain that, this is a maintenance item. You should think about this and that. So you can do those things, but another agent might want to do a full inspection. That's totally fine. The thing is that if the other inspector comes in and says a bunch of stuff, you're like, well, wait, we need to talk about this.
Yeah.
Because this one said this and this one said that. So you have some differences of opinions, but it's really rare. If you use a good reputable inspector, they all have the same set of guidelines that they're working within. They're all trained, through different inspection services to get their designations, and they're trained the same way. So they know what to look for. So it's rare.
So coming down to number D, this is probably one.
Number D.
Number D.
Letter D, 6D, new construction, right? This is the clause you want to put in there if you're walking through a home that's not finished in a new construction. Now, a lot of times when you're explaining this, D won't be relevant if it's the home's 1950 or whatever. But when you are dealing with the home that still has finishes left, you want to give yourself, what you're doing is giving yourself so many calendar days in here to meet with the builder or the builder's rep to see what those finishes are and possibly make custom selections. Okay? So generally, if you're meeting with someone like, let's say Jerry, we have Jerry's here at our office. You'll meet at their showroom and figure out what flooring you want and what, as long as you pick within the grade of what they had priced out with that home, the price generally does not move. You may have some upgraded options that you can select, and builders handle that differently. Some of them say, great, we'll do that. We're going to tack on the price with an amendment on the price. Other builders say, listen, I want 100% of that up front. I'm not putting these type of materials in there without compensation. Some say 50%. It's up to the builder. But generally, 14 calendar days. I would definitely talk with the listing agent and see what their calendar looks like as far as getting your buyer in there to make those selections. Give yourself, I've gone even as high as 21 calendar days, depending on how many selections need to be made. And also how the selections are made. Some people have big showrooms and it's really easy to walk through and make all the selections right there in a few hours. Other times, if you're dealing with a smaller builder, they might have you going from store to store to store. you know,
Yeah, the other time frame is like, I've selected a lot, and then I'm starting there, then you want 30 days minimum. Because there's a lot of work to do to get to start.
You're
So-
picking shingle colors, vinyl siding colors or paint colors, and you're doing a lot more then.
Yeah.
Kathy or Jess, you have a question?
Then do you still put an inspection period for like
No.
upon completion?
No.
Well, that depends. There are differences of opinions on inspections and new construction.
Well, I say no because then you're dealing with a city, they're gonna have to adhere, they're gonna have city inspections, yeah, and permits and stuff. I mean, you're obviously gonna be entitled to a final walkthrough, where you do a punch list with the builder, you take off the walls and all the imperfections, adjust hinges, all go over the warranties with their rep and go through the appliances and stuff like that, but generally you don't see an
If you
inspection.
put an inspection in there and don't utilize it, you'd rather be safe than sorry. At least you've offered it
You
out.
can do that.
Yeah.
It just, and I've talked with multiples of agents, some absolutely, there's no way that there's not gonna be an inspection on that property. And some are like, what the heck would you do an inspection on new construction
Right.
for?
I know, one of the inspectors told me they saw something one time where the builder didn't have drainage tile and he caught it. Is that what you heard too, from that Mike LeBlanc?
Yeah.
And said if had they not had an inspection, they would have never known.
Yeah.
Is that like
So there's
25,
things,
30,000?
Insulation, I mean,
Yeah, insulation is
that was
a,
one I came across.
that's an oft missed.
Insulation, one. HVAC is another one that can become an issue. Plumbing, there was a scenario over in Elkhart where the builder was also a prior HVAC guy. He did it all himself. He wired the house himself. He did all that stuff himself, and none of it was right.
It may be your,
So-
it may be your comfort level with the builder too,
That's part of it. But
Yeah,
so.
this is why we have documents to either they accept it or waive it
okay.
to protect our.
Would that be
That's good- that's good information.
Huh?
New construction, don't they get like a warranty? for
They'll
the house?
get a
Would that- would
1 year
that stuff fall
warranty.
under that?
Well, it should, yeah,
Yeah.
but that's a 1 year warranty. And you also adhere to, the structural part, which is it 10 or did it go to 15 now?
It's 15.
Went to 15. So you have to, for structural integrity of the property, it's warranted for.
And some builders are really good at callbacks, there's the follow-up service, and some of them are absolutely, you'd have to almost threaten a lawsuit,
So it's
So
really,
then that doesn't
it's
work.
you as an agent
Yeah.
and your buyer on what you would like best.
Okay,
Okay?
here's one here that we see a lot is the subject to, this is also one you can add. We have a subject to completion of sale, and we have a subject to sale. Let's go over the subject to sale first, right here. You would check this box and you would put the address of the home that they need to sell in order to perform on the house you're writing on. Okay?
Here's the important part of that. See attached addendum. The fact that you check this box is not enough to do anything. The addendum sets up the terms of the subject to sale. So without that, you have nothing.
So here's the thing on the subject to sales. There's an addendum that he says attached, right? As if I'm representing the buyer, I'm gonna try to get the 48 hours excluding weekends and holidays. Okay,
This is all gonna be next
week.
Next week.
And I'll just finish my thought on it then.
Please.
If I'm representing a seller, I would never accept 48 hours excluding weekends and holidays. Okay? No more than 24 hours and strike out that weekend and holidays. Okay, we'll have that, we'll actually go over those two addendums. Now, that's subject to completion of sale. We check this box up here. Again, we fill out the address and then the date that it's supposed to be closed on, right? And what we're saying is that this offer is subject to me receiving the proceeds from the sale of this house. Should something fall through, then I have an out here where we can now go from subject to completion to subject to sale.
And don't cheat.
Subject to completion means you already have a sale going.
Yes.
Yeah, you're already under contract,
Yeah.
pending financing. You
Gotcha.
might even be through inspection, but it could be pending inspection, pending appraisal,
Yeah.
pending title.
Don't cheat on that. I've seen people who have subject to sale offers on their properties, and then they come in and make it subject to completion of the sale. It's like, no, that's not where you're at. You don't have an
If
offer.
you're representing the seller and then you have a subject to completion of sale, I think it's prudent to ask that buyer's agent where they're at in that sale. I mean, did we just sell it yesterday? We still got inspections or appraisals? He might say, no, we're through inspection, we got appraisal, we actually got title yesterday, I mean, we're almost done. That might affect, where you're at.
Question.
So, termite inspections, sometimes required by the lender. It's also recorded down at the recorder's office. What I wanted to ask Lance, but I don't know this, is it Iowa law that a termite inspection is done?
It is not.
It's not Iowa law, okay.
It's not Iowa law. It is not always required by the lender. So it is something that you do. We put it automatically in there. And also we put automatically that the seller's gonna pay for it. If you go to Cedar Rapids or Ames, that's not the case. We have a lot of buyers paying for termite inspections in other places.
So
Omaha has its buyers.
Ames is buying.
Ames
So
is
here's the thing, you're either gonna get that a property needs treated because it's active termites, or there has been previous treatment there, no activity found, or just no activity, no prior treatment, okay? Third one's the best. The second one, I think you gotta be a little bit cautious on, because if they note damage found, be careful. I went and sold a sale by owner, as a Beaverdale home. We did the termite inspection, old damage was found. We brought in somebody, and as Jerome will tell you, termites eat the wood parts called the pith, like all the moisture. Well, these termites ate the pith out of this house. I mean, it is literally from front to back, and so Jerome's the only guy. I wish we could all work together to figure out another person, a resource we could use. It's not a structural engineer. It's someone that gives a structural evaluation, but to use the word engineer would be that's an actual, that's
who you bring in.
Yeah.
If they say this is really bad,
right.
Then you get your structural engineer and they say this is what you're gonna have to do.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of certificate or degree that holds, but it just requires a sharp object to go start stabbing everything, it's not much to it.
He actually has some pretty good,
Yeah.
he has some pretty good credentials, but
Yeah, no,
he's just a weirdo.
And he is weird. He's gonna tell some very off-color jokes.
Which is why I love him.
Yeah, and Mike show you some pictures of some very off-color pictures. But Jerome will stab the wood to death. And one thing good about Jerome is he knows the code inside and out. He knows not only what's damaged, but what the city's gonna require to have it fixed. And there could be everything from sistering and joists to jacking up the house and putting new seals on. It can be extensive. So just be wary of the termite inspection that you get that says no activity found, previous treatment. I would look at the damage report and figure out whether or not you need to get somebody in there for your buyer, or tell your buyer that, hey, we need to get somebody in there. Then at that point, just so you know the whole line here, it has to be fixed to the buyer's satisfaction, or the buyer can back out of the transaction.
So even if you're buying a house, or your buyer's buying a house that is sold as is, this is still in effect unless it's crossed out and initialed by both parties.
Correct, absolutely. And sold as is does not mean you can't figure out what as is means.
Right.
Okay, banks sell properties as is. That doesn't mean you're waiving your rights to inspection as long as you put it as a condition of the contract. It is your buyer's right to figure out what as is means. And as is might mean get me the hell out of here. So make sure you protect your buyers, and we're gonna go over the 4 ways to protect your buyers too. So damage should be investigated by buyer, could be extensive. Seller has the right to repair to buyer's satisfaction. Okay, inspection should be done by a qualified structural specialist. I'm very, and this is Jerome. Quit calling me an engineer. I'm not an engineer. That is a degree that he does not have. So he wants to be clear with people who are hiring him exactly what his credentials are. And he knows Des Moines code back and forth, and he's a little bit.
The main things that you need to take away from termite inspection is that the seller can have any termite company he wants treat or look at it, can also have any termite company he wants treat it. Okay, so that's the seller's area. Then if damage is found and it needs to be repaired, that's repaired by whoever the seller wants to buyer satisfaction. Okay, so that's the real twist right there. Damage has to be repaired to buyer satisfaction. So you want to make sure you have an understanding of what that's going to be. Because it may be, and here's the thing, this is something you should talk about up front with your buyers, because if somebody like is like, oh my God, if it has termites, I'm not interested, write that in. Write that in. Because people go, it's got termites, I don't want it. Well, it's like, no, that we should have done that at the beginning.
But that's also like saying, I don't want a home that no one's died in. Okay, there's about 2% of them out there that, from 1880 all the way up to 1985, people died in their home. They stopped all the way up to 2000. Now we're back to dying in our homes again with hospice. So unless it's a brand new home, the termite thing to me is to go over really, you go over in depth and what the buyer's right is if we find them and stuff. But I was a very heavily active termite area. You either have had them or you're going to have them if you don't make the necessary treatments, okay? Or, some kind of, whether it be Miller or Springer or whoever you're using, doing some kind of quarterly barrier around your home. You're eventually going to have them if you don't do it. It's just part of living in Iowa. We're heavily treed, heavily wood area. So other financing terms, that's on the 3rd page, I believe, or fourth page. Oh, it's first, the bottom, I'm sorry. I was thinking of other provisions. Other financing terms. This is where I write in if the seller's gonna give my buyer a credit for closing costs. I'll just tell you the verbiage I use. I put seller to contribute X and X amount of money towards buyer's closing costs, including prepays, origination, and discount points. Okay? You'll have some people kind of confusion try to put seller to contribute up to that amount, but somehow that lender usually finds a way to use that money. So I just put a flat amount in there. Some buyers, they just try to be savvy and they're like, well, I put 5,000 in there, but it's up to, we only need 3. Okay, then I'm going to give you 3. I'm not up to. I don't like that. So that's the verb. Seller to contribute X and X amount of money towards buyer's closing costs, including prepaids, origination, and discount. Prepaids are stuff like your insurance, appraisal, things like that, okay? Origination is obviously the cost of the lender and processing fees. And if there is any extra money and there's discount points, they can buy down the rate for your buyer, or help.
And don't confuse prepaids and actuals. Prepaids are things that you set up in your escrow accounts and stuff. Correct, Amy? Prepaids are what you set up in your escrow accounts, that kind of stuff. You prepay into those things. Actuals is the money out of pocket that you put into the transaction that the lender uses to provide services from outside their area. So
I think you just confused me.
I'm just saying. That's why mine says prepaid actual.
So I'm gonna tell you a story. This was years ago. I was showing properties to a couple and they wrote an offer on it. And the seller's countered. We accepted the counter. And I got everything signed off on the counter and sent it to the seller. And the listing agent called and said, hey, I'm out of town. This person's watching my business. Don't worry. Everything's fine. I'll have it signed off on in the morning. Call first thing in the morning. It was 9 a.m. Another RE/MAX agent, not ours, but another RE/MAX agent, calls me and said, oh, I'm sorry. We sold that house to somebody else last night. So you didn't have time to sign my offer, but you had time to show the property to somebody else and get it signed off by somebody else. This leads me to my next point, the clause of the contract, last page, back under notice. Notice goes over when a property or when this offer becomes legally binding and is legally enforceable. And we had an agreement. We had a verbal agreement. I wrote an offer. They countered in writing. I initialed that. My buyers initialed that counter. Didn't have the seller's initials on it. So this notice goes over when it becomes legal binding, and it's something like a Stevie Wonder song, right? Signed, sealed, and delivered. Okay? I always remember that from Stevie Wonder. And what that means is that final initials and signatures are on the purchase agreement and any addendums that accompany it, and they have been delivered to the parties or their agents. Okay? Not until then is it legally binding.
That's
not
why you were out.
Until then. Not a moment before then. But this happens all the time. You get an offer on You start negotiating, and all of a sudden another agent calls you up, says, I'm writing an offer too. I call the other buyer and saying, we are rescinding our counter offer. We have another offer in play. Tell your buyer, give us highest and best, or we'll go over how you handle those things. Different ways you can handle those things. Okay? And remember, that sucks to do to an agent that you had an agreement to, but am I representing Frank as an agent? Am I representing Julie? No, I'm representing my seller. And it's important for me, and you guys gotta understand this because it's part of the game, it's gonna happen to you. Don't take it personally that the listing agent got another offer and is now rescinding this counter. They're gotta represent their client. And that's getting the highest, the best terms, and everything else, right?
Yes. And remember, when we're using dot loop, every single thing we do in dot loop is timestamped. Everything. Okay? So.
Yeah, and this was my stories before dot loop. Now we have tools to make that a little easier.
It's easier, but it's also, make sure you don't mess up, because if I have a offer, it goes into the seller counters me back, and I'm like, yeah, cool, that sounds good. My buyers sign off of it and everything. It's like, yes, we got it sold.
No, I go over this point with my buyers, and I even tell them that story, and I tell them, I say, this is countered, and we sign it until I have it signed by the seller. They can pull this offer for you at any time.
No, not only signed by the seller.
I let them know that because I don't want them to be upset like these people were.
But listen, not only signed by the seller, because my buyer sent an offer to the seller countered it, sent it back to my buyer. My buyer said, yes, I like that, and they signed it. I got one more step. Until the seller has a copy of that offer, it's not done.
Does the agent work with that too? Because I think delivering it to the agent,
Nope.
You can't really control how it gets to the seller.
Seller has to have a copy. Don't you remember driving back and forth?
Yeah.
How you know the agent gave the seller the copy though? You
Getting
just
it
don't
to the
know?
agent is
What are you saying?
considered-
Yeah, I think it
I'm
actually,
missing what you're saying, I guess.
It has to go back through. Okay, now if you send it to the agent, it's finalized, all that, and the agent doesn't get it to the sellers, that's fine. I understand that. But the copy has to
it
go
does say,
back.
or their respective agent.
Yeah, but it has to get back. What we're doing is saying, hey, I got it signed, everything's wonderful, but we then don't send it on. We don't finish that last step. Dot loop, share, boom.
Done.
Share, get it there. Because we tell them, hey, my God, we got it, we bought it, everything's wonderful like that. And literally at that point, that seller can call you and say, I have another offer. And you haven't forwarded that to the agent, you're screwed.
You're screwed.
That's the timestamps on dot loop, because it will say, this is when I sent it, which means that notice was given, it was delivered.
Whether
Okay.
they've opened it or not,
Huh?
whether they've opened it or not.
If it's delivered, you see that if I have given
Yeah,
that
they don't have
to
to
you,
open it. It's delivered.
okay?
It's delivered.
But you have to understand that. Finish what you're doing. Because when it gets in, especially springtime, people are crazy.
When you get the signed purchase agreement back from the buyer and you got everything signed off, you get it to the other agent right away. That is you don't wait 5 minutes, you don't go to the bathroom, you get it in there so you know it's done, okay? Because that cancellation or, hey, we got another offer will happen and you're like, oh my God, I was just getting ready to send the signed copy over.
As long as you send it, then it's done.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to re-sign it, send it
No,
back,
no,
or
no,
anything
no.
like that. Okay.
All initials have to be on the changes.
But it
Sure.
has to get delivered. That last piece has to happen.
Like included in the property, obviously that is pretty self-explanatory, but I want to go over that in the purchase agreement. It goes over how attachments to the property, like ceiling fans, cabinets, it becomes part of real property. So you have to, your seller needs to reserve that should they want to take it with them. Now where this comes in is like a rose bush. It was given to the seller by their granddaughter for Mother's Day. They may have a sentimental attachment to that and want to reserve that rose bush or that lilac bush, or they have this, the formal dining room's got this beautiful light fixture from the family's old farmhouse, okay? They need to reserve those things. But included in the property, guys, I just start putting them on addendums. I start putting all my stove, refrigerator, washer, dryer, microwave, garage remotes, all window coverings and curtains and that on an addendum. And the reason why, and this is just kind of a pro tip, the reason why I do that is because an appraiser, an underwriter, does not want the appraiser to assign weight of value to those things that can be removed from the property. So what ends up happening is you have it on the purchase agreement, the appraiser will note it as value, and the underwriter is going to want some kind of bill of sale or, you know, these things represent no value. And this is just an extra step. So I went and just, as a common part of my practice, if I have a buyer that's getting financed, I put those things on an addendum and think through things, okay, like a shed. If you ever use the word I assumed, you're the one that's in the wrong, you messed up. Because this is not a business of assumptions. You understand? So if you ever find yourself trying to work through a problem, why you just assume, stop right there, you're the one that screwed up. You don't assume anything. You don't assume that the shed is footed down in the ground. That could just be, you know, sitting there. You don't assume that the cabinets in the garage are screwed into the wall. Those could be free floating. Isn't it better to have that stuff in writing and everybody agree to it right up front and not have any surprises at closing? And how many things have I bought over the years assuming? I learned a long time ago. Then you used to catch myself saying, like, okay, I messed up. So you don't ever use the word assume in this business. You're the one that's at fault. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yep, there's all kinds of fun. There's all kinds of fun stuff that go along with included property. Right? There's fun things.
Now, if you do insist on putting it on in the purchase agreement, I would go ahead because you have a bill of sale, I believe in Dotmove. Might as well just fill one out and just say these things are included in there for $1 or have no value or something like that.
You can also do that on the addendum.
Hot tub, swing sets, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just.
Yes, definitely, all those things. Yep. And listen, just because they said the hot tub was included, doesn't mean it's not included if it's in writing. If it's not in writing, they negotiated that and you put the washer and dryer, you didn't put the hot tub. You know, so we negotiated thinking you didn't want the hot tub. Well, you said you were included. Yeah, but it's not in the purchase agreement. So just because they're offering as part of the sale, it needs to be on your addendum, it needs to be part of the purchase, it needs to be part of the agreement, okay? Does that make sense? Yep.
Or
It reminds me of the movie Movie.
I was just thinking.
Oh,
I'm just saying.
We're taking all this everything
if you put nothing in this box, if you put nothing in that box, then it's what is agreed to on the seller's disclosure and the listing.
I would also, just a caveat to this. They're leaving the refrigerator, but they got the beautiful stainless steel one upstairs, and then they got the 1970s brown one in the basement. And all of a sudden you get the final walkthrough, and those things have been swapped out. Well, I told you I was leaving the refrigerator. I didn't tell you which one.
Yeah.
So you might want to say current ones in property, or even, you know, be as detailed. I don't think you can be overly detailed in this business.
Pretty sure Iowa Realty had to buy like a brand new washer and dryer.
Oh, yeah. I've bought a whole house full of appliances.
You're a nice guy.
Just one at a time.
You're a
here
nice
and there,
guy.
you know. You make a mistake like you allude to the dishwasher being there, and then you realize at closing that it was a portable one.
So
Oh, they yanked it, so, yeah.
And so you get to buy a new one.
last page back. Other provisions. That's why we're here now. So a lot of people have asked me, like, we wrote off in this stuff, but they don't have a seller's disclosure on, you know, on uploaded, or hey, I don't have the HOA or covenants. This is what I use other provisions for. It's certainly not exclusive to these things. Other provisions is just what it is, other provisions of the contract. But I find myself using this box for these two things a lot. Subject to receiving, reviewing, and accepting seller's disclosure within 72 hours of accepted offer. Does that make sense? There's no seller's disclosure. Don't let it hold you up from writing an offer. Just add a contingency. You're adding in a contingency of receiving, reviewing it, and accepting it. Okay? Same thing with HOA docs. They don't have them uploaded, the covenants, and you want to know if they have an 80-pound dog, and you know it's a hot listing, and well, I want to know. Just write it in a contingency, subject to reviewing HOA docs.
if you have an HOA, if you actually fill out the form that we have for that, that would be even better.
That'd be, well, that's you as the listing agent. We're talking to the buyer here. You can't control what the seller has done, right? Or what the listing agent has
That's
done.
the buyer.
The listing agent.
We have two. We have an HOA.
We have an
Info.
information, which is
Yeah.
what the seller puts on that listing. We have an HOA for the buyer that requests the information.
So here's the thing. Don't just put subject to receiving HOA docs or subject to receiving seller's disclosure. It needs to be subject to receiving, reviewing, or examining, fine, and accepting, okay? Because there might be something on that seller's disclosure that says, oh boy, there's a past fire in this home. You know, not that that's the end of the world. There's plenty of homes that have been done well, but just an example of something that might be, oh, the sewer lines broke, you know, it's not functioning, just something, whatever.
So
If you do write a contingency, date it. Contingencies have to have dates.
Closing in possession, top of page 2, I believe.
You couldn't have gone in order.
No, I didn't want to go over. That'd make it too easy.
Yeah, what the hell you doing?
I want you to think through closing in possession a little bit. You seasoned agents have obviously been through this a lot, but the newer agents would automatically always want closing possession the same day we close. Keep in mind that if we're moving into somebody's house and they're moving into somebody's house and they're moving in, we can't all close and move in the same day. That's, you know, the laws of physics don't allow that. We need time to move out. So think through that. We might close on a Friday and we might not get possession until Saturday or, you know, or even a Sunday. If we got 5 parties moving everywhere, right? Because that person that's moving out of the house that you're buying has to wait for the other person to move out. And there might be even another person in front of that that's moving out. So think through that a little bit and just try to explain that to your buyer that, hey, we're going to ask for what we want initially, but this could be a real possibility that we don't get this, okay? Some people have a big problem with that. Hey, I own this house. You're telling me they're in my, what if they ruin my house, you know? And there's verbiage in there.
One of the things to think about when you're dealing in a multiple closing situation is that in the process, you close from the front end and you move from the back end. Okay, so you have to be working where this person closes so that this person can close, so that this person can close, and you go up like this, and then you go from that end where now that they're closed, these people can move, and these people can move, and these people can move. So if you put common sense into it, you know, then you can make it work. And look for little things, you know, or somebody moving into a house and maybe they, you know, new construction, some of the builders are nice enough to give you garage possession.
Right.
If they're moving from a rental, you know, you can take advantage of that. Maybe
There's
you can
pods
give somebody
now.
a couple of days.
You know, pods you can
got
put in
pods,
someone's
pods.
driveway or something.
The idea that if you're working on the front end with somebody who's living with parents or living in a rental unit, that's a great negotiating tool. You know, if you can do that, if it's new construction, you know they got 60 days before they could possibly move, and you can say, hey, we're good. You won't have to move twice.
Yeah,
That's
and we actually
remarkable.
have, when we talk about multiple offer and how to win some of those, when we go over to class number 2, we'll go over some of those scenarios. You said something here and I lost my train of thought.
You had a train of thought.
Yeah,
When did this happen?
that's all right. I'll come back to it.
So I got a question about, you know, what time do you try to put on there, I guess? Because you don't know when they're gonna close, is what I.
Well,
kind of
okay,
think.
initially, when you're running the offer, you're representing that you pull what you want, which is normally closing in possession the same day. Let the
I'm talking
sellers.
about the time more than the day.
We do
You know,
that.
I mean,
Like,
like time frame of day. So
Gotcha,
I've
gotcha,
been putting on like
gotcha.
5 o'clock, you know, because, you know, the business day is over.
You can put upon successful closing, or that's normally what I do, you know, I mean.
So
as
don't
soon-
even put a
As
time.
soon as I close, and that's what I want for my buyer. That's ideal.
Yeah.
Now the seller listing agent might come back and say, hey, because of this chain of thing we got going, would your buyer be willing, we're closing Friday, would they be willing to do 5 PM on Saturday? And that's an official counter. We go back and try to get the agreement on it, okay? But always initially, I would
Are you
say
talking about
upon
closing time or possession time?
possession time, right?
Either. I mean,
It doesn't give you a time for
but you're
closing,
not
it only gives you a
knowing the
date.
closing time.
Right,
you know?
possession there.
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
time
we're
is
talking
possession.
30 days out.
Yeah, the time's only on possession. I would put, you know,
Alright.
upon closing or whatever you want, but upon successful closing.
So don't put it.
So to kind of give you guys a background story, this is what I was going to say. So I was a younger agent, and I was helping one of my friends move, and they had possession and closing at the same time. And I remember it was an older agent who'd been around forever, and he was the listing agent. And my buyers get there with their moving truck, and these guys are just starting to move out. They called me up, of course, panicked, because you're paying for that moving truck hour by hour. And the listing agent knew the score. Called me and said, what is going on, man? I mean, why are these people not out? Well, they're supposed to be out. I told them to be out, but at the end of the day, what can you do? My buyers wants me to go there. I don't know, Matt, start moving them out or something. I don't know what it is. But I remember the old time agent goes, I tell you what, Matt, why don't you just go to litigation? And it was being a smart ass. What he's saying is, what can you do? By the time you do anything legally, these guys will be out. So what are you gonna do? That's why it's best to make sure everybody's in the know. Everybody can, work things out. The less surprises you have at closing, the better. Okay?
Yes, and put times on there.
So,
Because if you don't put a time on and it's just a date, that date goes until midnight.
Acceptance. This is a big deal right here when you get at the bottom, when you have this date right here. When accepted, this agreement should become a binding contract. If the offer is not accepted on or before, does it say counter on or before? Or does it say accepted? So a lot of you guys are putting dates in here and then the seller signs and that's a different date. And we got a null and void contract before we even start. Now we close deals like this because as long as everybody goes towards what they agreed to, we got a binding offer. But boy, they have an out. They have an out.
They have an out until they do something that is moving past that date.
The moving past that date. So if I was you guys, I would, be very cautious about that and even get into a habit of having initials next to it if it changes or for whatever reason the seller and buyer can't accept that. Okay, I just don't want your contract to be null and void right off the get-go, and if all of a sudden another offer comes in and that listing agent's looking at this trying to find a way out of their signed, sealed, and delivered offer. Okay. Then the buyer brokerage compensation earning $290. We all know what that hold the records for 5 years. Offset
That date needs to match then.
Yeah, the seller, when they let's say DocuSigns or .web signs this, that date and time should not be past this.
Okay.
Okay. And sometimes those dates in there are maybe like that evening or the next day. And by the time you get done with counters, we're 48, 72 hours from the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what are you putting in there then?
Honestly, I don't use that. I don't put a date in there a lot. I love some people will if it's a hot listing, they want an answer right away or something like that. But a lot of times I won't put a date. Me personally, that's we go with that with the buyer and that's the decision we make together. You'll have to do the same. Tax proration. I see a lot of you guys that are even 8, 10 years in the business, which is about how long it took me to figure out what the tax proration was. I see you guys just putting in 12 months, and you're gonna be wrong. You're gonna be overdoing it half the time, and you're gonna be underdoing it the other half. Okay, so does anybody here want to go over real quick how the tax proration works? Why are we in arrears? Why are we in arrears? Why aren't we current? Does anyone want to take a guess why? What's that?
We're paying for last year.
Yeah, we're in arrears, but why?
I don't know why.
Why? Because during the Great Depression, the governor came out and gave amnesty to everybody who was paying taxes. Said, you don't need to pay your taxes this year, we'll pick them up next year. And we've been in arrears ever since.
Let's just catch up.
So I told you I was going to tell you the why and the how.
Kind of sucks.
So it does. So what happened? What makes it confusing is, and I wish I had a more interactive calendar up here. I think it's easier if you have something image in your head. But we pay our taxes in March and September. Everybody owns a house and knows that, right? But the fiscal year is from January 1st to June 30th. The second half of the fiscal year is from July 1st to the end of December. So if we were going to close the end of this month, by show of hands, I'll call on you, how many months of proration are they gonna have? January 31st. Boy, we need this class.
7?
months?
We'll go over the
How many
lifting,
months
on the
for
lifting
insurance
side.
to close the end of the
January, the end of January this year, how many months proration?
Well, it ends in June.
Oh,
Anybody?
13.
All right.
13, I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
She did.
All right, I want everybody to pay attention. I know we're getting a little restless, class is getting a little long. This is important because you need to know you need to know that the lenders will not figure out the credit. They will not use the estimated credit towards their good faith estimate or something like that. But it's certainly a useful tool when you're getting a credit back from the seller to offset some of the closing costs initially. Okay, this might be the reason why you need to explain to your buyer that you only need $2,000 in closing costs versus $5,000 in closing costs. Okay?
Oh, I see what you're saying, because
Okay.
the taxes are gonna be.
Let me try to explain this to you guys.
Good luck.
You've tried for like a year.
So,
I think we need a visual, like marker board.
you need a marker board.
You have some of those big poster boards.
Let's just go grab them. Go ahead and schedule.
Can we just?
Yeah, you got that chart.
They've got the little calculator thing.
Do you want to grab that pencil really fast?
Yeah, 'cause I was trying to figure that out. I was trying to figure that out the other day.
Less silver, just use less silvers.
What if somebody says?
Because I get it. I mean, I get it.
All right.
I can't figure it out.
Here we go. This is just how I know it in my head. I don't even have to figure it out.
No,
It's on the calendar.
Hey, guys, hey, guys, pay attention here, please. Just, at least if you know it all perfectly and you're fine, then be quiet.
May, June, July. Did I miss a month? I think I'm good. Okay, remember, this is the first half of the fiscal year. This is the second half. Why it gets confusing is we pay our taxes in March and September. So we said 13 months, 14 months, 15 months, and it drops back down because we pay our taxes 6 months. It was 9 months at the end of March, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, drops back down to 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Huh? You want to help me out with this? Who do that again? We pay in September and March. You pay 6 months.
So when you pay your taxes this March, what are you paying that 6
Here, let
months
me-
for?
let me-
2000.
15 months. 15 months.
So in March,
So
you'll
just put
pay.
15 months in that.
It'll never be more than 15 months. It'll never be less than 9.
So in March.
I'll get you in the right range at least.
This March, you're paying last year will be due.
So 9 to 15.
In March, you're paying for 17 months.
That's where I'm at with that.
How was that?
You know what? I really think that-
Anybody want to learn that? You want to understand it?
Yes.
Okay. Here's January, July, December. There's January, July, December, okay? Now, here's what goes on is you've got taxes here and taxes here, okay? So if you pay taxes in March, you paid that half. Paid that half, okay? If you pay taxes in September, you paid that half.
Because we're a year behind. You're talking about the year behind.
So that's really all it is. So all you know is that if you look now, when's the last time you paid taxes now? Right today,
September.
last September. So last September went through and you paid the last half of those taxes from last September.
He's talking about the fiscal year. The fiscal year is from January 1st to June 30. When you paid in September, you paid September 2017. You actually paid January 1st.
You paid The previous year.
You're right. July
Okay.
1st to December 31st, which is why when you look at January of 2018, you go all the way from January 1st, 2017, all the way into January 2018, which is 13 months.
All you gotta do is figure out where are you at on here. If you're before this payment date, then you go all the way back to that previous year. This just pays that 6 months each time. So think about that and see the brackets, and you think, oh, it's January, okay, last time I paid it was September, so that paid the previous end of the previous year, so I owe the whole last year plus January. That's 13 months.
And it'll be that way until March, and then you will have paid
Yep, then you pay, then you
January
owe.
1st through June 30th of 2017. So now what's owed is July 1st through whichever date you're on.
There's two different ways of looking at it, two different ways of thinking about it. But the bottom line is like, when's the last time you paid and what did that pay? If you pay March, it's the first half of the previous year. You paid September, it's the second half of the previous year. And then you start from there and accumulate.
From the fiscal year, not from the date you paid, but from the fiscal year. Remember, the first half is January to June 30th, the second half is July 1st to December 31st.
That's what you said. You paid this part. You paid.
I know that's not easy to grasp. It took me a long time to get it to. It is necessary for you to grasp it, and it's necessary to tell sometimes your sellers the why. Because I'll go just pay my taxes, I'm current. You know?
Explain that to an attorney
But
sometimes.
it's like, you got it, you're getting a pension.
Like on mine.
I need to go 12 months.
My taxes
Yeah.
doubled
Just pay it.
You got your house also.
because they said I didn't pay anything last year.
That's what I'd be like.
I'm trying to figure that out.
They assessed your home and they didn't send you a bill.
It's like
I
5
said,
years
no,
prior,
'cause my-
like,
my
trust
house
you.
is like $900.
That's not. And then when the tax bill came, they paid the taxes that were due, but you didn't have enough money in there. So they're making up 6 months of
Why
that.
wouldn't
you
they
didn't
prorate it better though? Why didn't they understand? it
Because
better?
you
That's
only
not
assessed
your
for your,
job. That's your job. and
no,
your
no.
agent's job.
He has a new house.
I understand.
You were only assessed for your land at that time.
That's what I'm saying.
You're not assessed for
And
your
then now-
structure. Now you're
Okay.
being.
So that's what jumped so much.
You have to know where you're at.
So we're gonna go over this whole purchase agreement as if Lance was gonna,
Well, that kind of freaked me out. I was like, oh, what the heck?
like, if I was his buyer, if he was my buyer's agent. Just for the second class, just so you guys know, 2 weeks from now, we're gonna go difference between amendments and addendums. We're gonna go over different deeds, different types of ownership, joint tenancy, tenants in common. Gonna go over multiple offer situations, strategies for winning multiple offer situations, earnest money in return, and what your broker can do if there's a dispute. I know sometimes we can't get these things signed off on, there's some kind of, but I want you to know what your broker can do when that happens, okay? So you can explain that to your clients. Subject to sale versus subject to completion of sale. There are some pro strategies here, and there's a difference, and that subject to sell addendum has specific verbiage in there about who gives notice and how that goes down. You need to know the difference. And I gotta tell you, up until he told me like a year and a half ago, I had no idea. Dual agency, what you can do, what you can't do, what you must do. We go over 4 ways to protect your buyer, and you can explain that to your buyer every time you're with them. There's 4 ways to protect yourself. We take advantage of all 4. We've done everything we can to protect you, okay? We'll go over that. And that's what I have so far. So on that note, let's pull up the purchase agreement. I'm Lance's principal. I'm his client. He's writing an offer for me. And he's gonna sit down and explain to me like I've never seen an offer before, how he would explain and summarize the things that we just went over, okay? All right, let's start.
Okay? Yeah. Here's the first thing. If you can't do this with a single offer page turned upside down and set in front of your client so they can read it, you're not there yet. That's the deal. If you have to do this, where you're like, okay, and then turn it back around, you're not there yet.
This might be copy, but I could explain this to you without even looking at it.
Of course.
Every single line.
Yeah, that's 23 years.
So,
I've been
well,
alive
same.
for 23
Huh?
years.
Very copy.
That makes me feel
That's when you know
better.
you're there. You might say, hey,
So you're
what's
saying I'll never be
what's
there?
point number 7? And then, you know, so,
Okay,
all right.
okay, so,
The reason why he's explaining it to me, because I'd explain it the way, but then he's gonna correct me halfway through.
okay, so here's the deal. So you turn it upside down, you set it in front of your client and say, okay, I want to make sure that you understand not only the boxes that we've filled in our process of filling this offer out, that you also understand some of the, what we call boilerplate, which is all the writing that's around those offers. So first off, we start, and we've got agency. We've talked about agency, and you understand that. I'm representing you in the transaction. The other agent's representing the buyer, and that's all that says here. Then we put the information about you, because it's coming from you to them, the address, the legal description, those kinds of things, and the purchase price that we've talked about, along with the terms of that. Now, the terms are important, because if something would happen and those terms would change, and you didn't qualify anymore, then you wouldn't be responsible for that purchase agreement. Like, say, you know, when we had to go invade Kuwait, the interest rates went from 9, and I know I'm dating myself, the interest rates went from 9% to 12.5% in one day.
What happened in World War II?
Matt, you didn't hear my joke.
One of those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all right.
We're done.
That's all right. Yeah, so I'm out.
That's right.
So anyway, so we put that together. We've made it subject to the new mortgage, which is in here. We understand that, you know, we need to get all our information. We need to get forward, moving on, getting the information to the lender and get that put together. We've also checked that it's subject to the completion of sale, which means that it's still subject to you getting closing on your home and getting that money. And I'll be working to coordinate those things between the close of your home and the purchase of the new one and make sure it all gets there. And then it's also subject to appraisal. You might not be able to qualify anyway if it didn't appraise, because you'd have to make up the difference in that. And we're right now struggling to make sure you have down payment on yours. So I understand that. We are asking here the other financing terms that we're asking them for $3,500. It just offsets your upfront closing costs and takes less money out of your pocket. It's a way to finance your closing costs in the loan and keep your upfront costs out. Does that make sense? Any questions on that front page?
Not at all.
Okay, so I'd have you initial right here.
Okay.
All right. Then we go into page 2, and we talk about the closing of possession. We've talked about that we're trying to get it set so that the buyer of your home is going to close at a certain time so that you can close on this home. Those people are going to move out, and we need to work those dates. And that's what we're trying for in here, is to get you a little bit of move time from after they close, get you like a day of move time. And we're also going to give the sellers of the property you're buying, trying to get them a day of move time, just to make it all smooth. As we move forward, we might find that we need to do some adjusting on this. If we do, we need to do that on an addendum, and we'll work towards that. Okay. Taxes, we've talked about that at length. Basically, they're going to pay the taxes that are due and payable at this point. And then there's going to be an amount of taxes that are not payable. In other words, they literally can't go down with money in their hand and pay those taxes. So what they do is they take that amount of money, and we figured that based on the possession date and the millage rates and things that Jenny puts together so eloquently for us. Yeah. And we take that, and then they give you that money. They say, here's what we will owe, or a certain good approximation of that. And then you say, okay, for giving me that money, then you don't have any responsibility anymore in those taxes. I take them and take the responsibility for when they do come due. So that's what that's all about, okay? In special assessments, the same thing works. Like maybe you had a sidewalk that had to be put in, something like that, and there's a special assessment, then that has to be paid or negotiated to make that come due. In the duties of the parties, that's the first time we back out. And by that, I don't mean not represent you. I mean, just make sure you understand that there's two parties to this transaction, and it's the buyer and the seller. We're not party to that. as much as we're involved in the negotiations and everything that goes along, it's still between the buyer and the seller. And so if something happens and you call me up and you're all upset, and I have to say, listen, you really need to talk to an attorney, I want you to know it's not because I don't want to help you. It's because I'm not party. I can't be involved, nor can the company be involved in those kinds of things. That's between buyer and seller. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. In condition of the property, what they're saying is the seller is going to keep the property in the same condition, ordinary wear and tear accepted, but in the same condition as when you saw it and when you wrote this offer to purchase it. They're not going to have any campfires in the living room or anything like that, you know. So that's the idea of that. And then they give us an opportunity just prior to closing to be able to walk through, take a look at everything, make sure that things look about like they're supposed to. And that, you know, at that point, we'll look if there happens to be any repairs or anything that we've requested, that we see that those things are taken care of as well. Okay. Now, speaking of those repairs, we have a thing in here where we're going to look at an inspection period. And based on today, I'm thinking that if we had like 7 business days, that probably is going to be enough for us to get, you know, people in there, have them take a look at everything, make sure things are good. I want you to arrange that because you are important that you are there. More important than if I'm there, actually.
Do you have people I could use?
I have names that I can give you that you can call and try to set something up, make sure that works for you, okay? Now, during that, you do the whole inspections, you look at everything, you get an idea, and then we'll sit down and talk about the things that inspection revealed. And if there are things that are either health and safety or high dollar amounts, those kinds of things, then we come back and we say, you know what, those things really need to be taken care of. And we put an addendum together asking the sellers to then fix those things that go along with it. Okay? So then the homeowner's warranty, that's a thing where it's part of making sure things go well, because even during an inspection, you might look and find everything looks good, but something happens after the fact. And the seller didn't know about it. The inspection didn't reveal it, but a homeowner's warranty then gives you an opportunity to have, for a small deductible, some coverage on a lot of items that might happen in the house. And so I always like it. I always think it's a good thing, but that's completely up to you. And here's the sheet that's about that. And you can either sign off that we're going to go ahead and go forward with that, or if you just don't want to, then you need to sign off that you waited.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay. And then it's not new construction, so you're not going to worry about that at this point. That's only when a house isn't been lived in before, okay? And then wood destroying insects, that has to do with termites and you know, there's different kinds of things that eat at your house if it's there. We have it looked at, the seller has it inspected. They need to give us that inspection report, and we'll take a minute to go over that and just see if there's any things that we need to be concerned about. If it's had termites before, if it's been treated, if it's had any damage before. Because the idea is that if it's been treated, that's probably as good a thing as not finding any termites, because around here we get them a lot. If it's been treated, at least we know at that point it's like, hey, we got nothing to worry about. They're done.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay, we initial right there. Then we go into, and we've got some included property. Included property means the things that are part of and attached to the house tend to stay with the property. There's always exceptions here and there, but generally speaking, they can't take like fixtures down. They can't take cabinets off the walls. If it's screwed in and it's become part of the property, then it needs to stay. That includes blinds and curtain rods, not curtains, because they're not attached. They're hanging, right?
Okay.
So we want to make sure that we discuss that. And if there's anything that we want them to leave, we put it in here, okay? And then in the personal property and debris, we want them to take everything out that's in the property. So we want them to take their, you know, spare tires that are in the garage that some people leave. We want to make sure that they don't leave 2 or 3 bags of garbage, old lumber or something like that. We want all of that out of there, and that's what we're talking about here. Then in the insurance, the way insurance works is that the sellers need to keep insurance on the property during their time, all the way up until closing. And you need to have insurance from that very day on. I recommend you get it a little bit early. There's actually some insurable equity that you have in the property once this offer is signed. So that's something you could talk to an insurance agent about. And then Joint tenancy is typically how you take possession. So you and your wife would take possession as joint tenancy. And if the sellers are married, they would give possession that way. By possession, I mean that's the way they sign off on the deed, the way you take possession based on that. The abstract and title, what happens is we have a whole history of the house. We take that abstract, it's delivered to a title company, an abstract company, and they research everything. They actually go back 40 years and look at everything that's in that abstract. They look for when the title was transferred, when people are married or divorced, when liens are put on for mortgages or second mortgages. They look at all that kind of stuff and put that all down on paper. Then they send it to an attorney. An attorney then looks it over, studies that, makes sure that all the transfers are in order, ready to go. And that at this point, it's what's called mercantile title. And so it's available to be transferred into your name, and the loan can be put on as a first lien. Okay, remedies of the parties, which, by the way, everybody, that's all been changed and it's up online, so it's different now. So remedies of the parties just discusses the options you have in law or in equity about the possession of the property. Because as soon as it's signed legal binding contract, you do have an equity position in the property at this point. So if something happens, the seller says, oh, yeah, I changed my mind, I'm not selling the property. Things happen, then you have opportunities to come back on them and seek some kind of form. In mediation says that if there's a dispute after the fact, that you can then ask for a third-party person to come in, discuss what's going on, render an idea of how you might be able to settle that, and then see if that's acceptable to both parties. Okay, we do that through the Polk County Court system and their mediation group, and it works out most times. We find that somewhere around 80% of things can be mediated versus going to court. It's a whole lot cheaper. Attorneys tend to sign this for me. They don't, like, if it's a different kind of arbitration, they won't sign that. Okay, does that make sense to you? Any questions about that part? Okay, so initial that. Then we go to the last part, it's about court approval. You don't have this, but if there was any approval required by court, it would be, subject to those things happening. In funds, it says any money that, like you're giving me the earnest money and that kind of stuff. And what it says is that those funds then are attributed into the process. So you're not going to get an earnest money refund at the end of the process. It's credited into the closing. So all of those funds get accounted for in the process, and it's all above board. You see everything right there. In general provisions, it talks about performance being of the essence here. Like timing is important in here. You have to follow through. You have to make sure that things are going, that you do things in an orderly fashion. It also says that heirs, executors, and people that are part of this transaction after the fact are all taken care of in this. And it also says that this agreement survives the closing. That's important for you, because if we go in, we look, they're still moving out everything. We've agreed that they're going to leave the refrigerator, and we go in, we sign everything, close, they get their money, and we go in and the refrigerator's gone. It's not, oh, gee, too bad. This survives it. This is still in effect, and you're covered. They still owe you that refrigerator, okay? Notice just says that the people below are the people that are going to get notice about any of the things that are going on in the purchase, that like the inspections and those kinds of things, that buyer and seller are the ones being notified. And acceptance, this is a thing where if you want a response by a certain time, we can request that. It does two things. One, it puts you in a position of you give them until tomorrow afternoon, so they get till tomorrow afternoon. If you don't put anything in there, then you can say, forget it, not interested. So it's up to you whether you want to put a date in there or not. I'm not a big fan of dates, but I want you to understand that they need to respond quickly. The buyer's compensation just says that at the closing of this, there'll be a charge of $290 on that comes in your closing that you pay. That's for the processing, all the things that our back office does to get all of this ready for the closing. Okay? Any questions about that part?
Mauro?
If you sign here, then I'll immediately give it to the seller.
Notice what he said in the last part there is immediately give it to the seller. do not sit on these offers for any long length of time. As soon as it's signed, you, under the ethics commission, are required to deliver this out. Same thing as a listing agent. At your earliest, soonest possibility, you need to present offers as well that comes in, okay?
Did anybody have any questions about that presentation, about anything I said, what I did? You need to be able to give it just a quick synopsis of each section, and then make sure that if they have a question, you can then answer it. But you need to touch on each one of those. If you don't, they're gonna be like, oh, you skipped that one. You skipped that one. You know, what's going on there? You skipped that one. So each one needs something, yes.
I just thought of this, so maybe it's not relevant. At the very beginning of the class you were talking about, you don't want to just, click, click, click and submit.
Correct.
But there are times where I've been at a showing, it's at the end of it, somebody's coming from out of town, I've got my next appointment in a couple hours, I left some time there in case, and they want to write. We talk about it and they got to get going. There's not time to do that, and they haven't seen a purchase agreement before. Has anyone had success with, or is there something I'm not thinking of? If you had like a document that you typed up with a synopsis like that, a bullet point 1 is this, bullet point 2 is this, and sent it with
Bring
or on the
synopsis
fly.
would be the same thing as sending them the purchase agreement and said, will you take time to
And I always say read everything before you sign it.
You certainly, and you confirm with them that they can. It's a very worst case scenario.
Right.
You need on the phone,
Put
say,
something in
listen,
language
as soon as you
terms,
get that picked up, you guys look at it and we'll talk through it.
You also,
Yeah, if you have any
it's not a
questions,
bad
write
idea
that
to have a
down.
buyer's packet
Right.
in your car, because you could sit there at the table and go over with them and do it the old fashioned way and sign it. Or you could go over with them real quick and say, I'm gonna queue it up on dot loop, I just wanted you to see every bullet point. So I just learned a few things listening to him, but I have a different way of presenting that's very similar. I mean, it's just, but I do touch on every point, okay?
Yeah.
Again, reasonable skill and care. Guys, it's not what you know, it's what you should know. If you're ever in trouble and we're going to court on your guys' behalf, they're not gonna take, well, I didn't know that. Okay, you're professional, you should have known, and that's what matters. Okay, as a broker, he needs to know certain things, I need to know certain things. They're not gonna take, I didn't know that. Ignorance is not an excuse in those situations. They say you're a licensed professional in the state of Iowa, and there are certain things that you should know, regardless of whether you did or not.
Now,
So
you can, in talking with yours, one of the things you can do, if the market's moving quick and stuff like that, is the first time you sit with them, put that out and say, listen, I want to go some of these things, go through them, because what I want is when we get ready to do this, I do this with sellers always. But what I want you to be able to focus on what's in the blanks, because you already know the other stuff. That's where I need your focus at that point, because those are the things that change. But if you understand the basics of it, we'll be in good shape. So let's take a few minutes to go over it right now.
TV mounts anchored to the wall, again, don't assume. Is it supposed to be attached? Well, probably, if they take them and I have big holes in the wall. Remember, this contract, any contract, is only as good as someone that wants to hire an attorney to force it to happen. So you can't come out and say, we got a contract, and they stick their middle finger up at you. They gotta go enforce it. They gotta go hire somebody and get a judge to enforce the contract. Don't put them in that situation. Put the TV mounts in the addendum. Just don't leave it up to chance, right? Don't leave it up. The curtain rods are supposed to stay. All window treatments. The seller will come back and say, okay, but we made these match our boys' room there, and we want to take those. Okay, we agree to that. Okay. The one thing that I would add to the mediation, and this is what I say, just to keep it simple. But number 14 is a mediation clause. Should a problem arise between you and the seller during or after the sale, by initialing this, you're saying you would have to do a mediation rather than seeking a lawsuit first. It's not legally binding mediation, and it's the only clause in the contract we don't have to have a meeting of the minds on. Meaning, if you initial it and the seller doesn't, we agree on everything else, we still have a legally enforceable offer. If you don't want to initial it, the seller does, we don't have to agree on that part. But I think it's a great idea. So it's that simple, okay? But keep in mind, down at the bottom in those little parentheses, initialing or not initialing does not constitute a counteroffer. We do not have to have a meeting of the minds on that point in order to have a valid, legally enforceable offer. Okay?
Anything else on that? Okay,
So as long as one party signs it, it's good.
No, both parties need to initial.
They both have.
both have, if, to be in effect.
And if they ask you a little bit more about that, please let them know there is a fee for the seller and the buyer to enact mediation. It's about $400 or $500.
Well, it depends on how much it is. You know, you go up to, used to be 4,000, I don't know if it's 4 or 5 now, but at a certain, up to a certain level, then you get a disinterested third party. If it gets past that level, you actually have to get to an attorney mediates it.
The one part Lance skipped was duties of the parties number B. And it just says,
Again.
duties of the parties number 6B, 5B, I'm sorry. Just says sellers and buyers acknowledge sellers have a legal duty to disclose any material defects of which they have actual knowledge of or could not be discovered by a reasonable inspection. That's why Iowa law requires us to look at the seller's disclosure, seller fill it out, and for us to sign it. There are some parties that are exempt from that, and we'll cover that during the seller portion of this training course, okay? And also that's the first way to protect yourself, which we'll cover as well. But the seller is under legal duty. So when you get that radon report back, like he's saying it is 22, it's very easy to convince your seller to put a mitigation in, because we gotta disclose that to everybody. That's not just this buyer now all of a sudden knows, right? We gotta disclose it to everybody. So that's why you know you kind of got the seller, like you just presented an offer to one of my sellers, and the radon came in high. It was an easy one to explain. It's like, Jolene, we're gonna have to tell everybody about this, and they're all gonna want a mitigation. So if you're happy with the offer, let's just put in the mitigation. Okay, you know,
Damn it,
so,
Jolene.
I know, damn it, Jolene.
Just mitigate.
So, homeowner's warranty, if they want it, I explain it just, it's a third-party insurance company that has a deductible that covers the majority of the mechanics.
We have to have that signed
In the
now,
Or waived, one or the other.
or wait.
It should auto-populate. And listen, we got a little bit of a blowback from that, so we'll just address as many people as we can up front. It leaves us liable. It's a liability for a buyer to come and say, well, how come you didn't present that to me? I did. I don't remember. I was never offered the home warranty. You know, then you get in a situation, you're like, geez, Frank, I see these last 10 deals, everybody had home warranty. You didn't offer it to this guy? Why? Or, you know, that he did accept it, but he didn't know, or she didn't know what was covered. We want the home warranty, but you didn't go over, I thought the roof was covered. No, it's not covered. Well, you know, so this is just a way of protecting you guys. Keeping your E&O insurance as low as we can keep it and making sure that the liability falls off you and the brokerage. No, you waived it, sir, right here. No,
That's in our.
you accepted it. Here's the outline of what's covered. Here's your signature. Can't deny that. Okay? So is it an extra step? Yes. Do we want to put extra steps in your business? No. And we're not, none of us are trying to make your job harder. Trust us on that. We're doing the same job. But we will protect you, and we will protect the brokerage, always, okay? So hopefully, you know, it's an extra step, but I think it's an extra step we can all live with if it protects us, okay? Any questions on that? A lot of people are loyal to other warranties, whatever. Do it, whatever you're comfortable with. I would highly recommend you to look at HMS because we looked at it for about a year. It wasn't some knee-jerk reaction that we looked at. And we didn't just shop this warranty and this warranty. We shopped them all. And we're trying to get the best product that gives our clients the best coverage. Okay? I hope you know that. We're always trying to put the best people in front of you guys.
And the 578, the Premier, is substantially better coverage than just the basic.
Oh, yeah, I would always try to go for
So
the 578. I was
I
always,
really enjoyed that
just
meeting
standard.
at Lunch and Learn
Yeah.
that they did,
I mean,
explaining it.
I won't go on why it's better. It's better. It's better. If you guys ever want to sit down one-on-one and go over the differences, I'll be happy to do that. But in the meantime, use the HMS ones. They should auto-populate now.
Any questions? Does anyone have any questions for Jamie and Ginny since they're here about,
Yeah, we have
about
like
kind of the
experts.
processing side of any of these forms?
Jenny's next.
Want to know how to sit at your desk.
Yes.
Ready?
We absolutely.
It's nice to meet people, yeah.
Anything for?
Like a
Yeah,
brainstorm.
yeah, I was like, you finally get to meet Jenny.
Yeah, now I know who Jenny is.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
I am a person. She was AI.
Just not a
So
computer.
this is every other
Sweet to 6, right? Sweet to 6. 5 to 6. We're trying to get it into 5.
Okay.
But yes,
So
every
not
other.
necessarily in April.
Yeah, it's supposed to.
Because-
Okay.
Would they be absolute?
Why are you filling out a purchase agreement?
I'm just saying the difference.
We never used to. The
We never
complete
did
transparent
before, now we are.
answer is we had a client
Keep you out of court.
that was not happy, that we all had to pay a little bit more, insurance as a result. So that's the complete transparent answer. Now, we're trying to protect you guys so it doesn't happen again. Okay? That's the, we're all good until someone calls an attorney and says they didn't do this right. And then we have to re-examine ourselves and think, we can do this better, we can protect you better. That's all, that's all. But trust me, I'm not there selling homes to, the last thing I want is more steps.
Yeah.
Here's-
He bits like crazy, and it's like, there's nothing we can do, we have to do it the right way.
Yeah, I'm not that far, I'm just like you guys, I don't want any more steps, but I get it when it comes to protecting you, and it protects your license, protects our license, we have to look after each other, so.
Just something to remember, anytime we add a new document, again, it's not to make life harder. The reality is because someone got sued, we now have to protect everyone else.
Yeah, that's the big and the short of it. Now, first, I want to thank everybody here for coming. I hope that us lecturing here isn't that boring. I do want to try to get more involvement for you guys to keep you interested. But again, the whole goal is for you guys to get up here, to be able to watch us on a podcast for a refresher. And you guys should be as experienced, again, as Lance and I. You walk out of here, and whether you're in this a year, you're in this 2 years, or even 5 years, you walk out of here a better agent. You can compete with any agent that's out there with the information you have. Buyers are going to throw questions at you, and you know the answer, and that brings an extreme amount of confidence. And confidence can be felt, those nonverbal cues, and that's what we want for you guys. We want the best agents out there doing it the right way. Okay?
Any CEUs for this? CEUs?
Okay, so let me answer this question.
We're working.
It has been submitted for approval. It has not officially been approved yet. Currently, I am the only one approved to be an instructor. We're working on everyone else, hence why I'm here in case it gets approved.
That's fine. So then it wouldn't matter.
That's why we had you sign
I'm
stuff.
trying. I'm not guaranteeing it. I'm trying.
At some point, if it's not this one, it'll definitely be in the
Yeah, if it's
future.
not this one, we'll
Because
be
if you're not
submitted the next
feeding
one
me, at
too,
least
so.
you
That's
some
cool though, that it was
education.
Yeah, we can look.
So this one,
If they let us-
if they let us.
I can get fish formula in the fridge.
The next one will qualify for the kid.
Like the
Yes.
Wednesday.
I have a question.
Like
And
I really thought we were-
this, I know, I hate to even ask.
No, ask
It makes me crazy. Okay, here is the deal. When I first started here, I was very much trained as to who did what in the office. But I was so caught up with just being an agent that I forgot a lot of like what you guys do. So sometimes when I have questions as I'm going through a transaction, I'm like, oh yeah, so which one in the office do I contact for this? And I can't remember. And so then I'm like trying to trace down which person is the right person for this particular question. So could we review maybe who does what in the office?
Matt does everything.
Yeah. No, that's what he's told me. That's why I'm confused.
Go ahead.
No, one of the things too is that my job is to make sure that if you have a question, it gets answered. If you have a problem, that we work towards a solution. That's all I do now. I'm not a full selling agent. I've released the Hanson group is not me anymore. That's Michelle and Josh. So I would do a rare transaction once in a while just because I can. But I don't sell. My full-time job is working with agents, whether it's training them, answering questions, solving problems, keeping you out of court, keeping your license, whatever that might be.
Bailing you out of jail, whatever.
Uber drivers.
You can always call me. As far as what goes on in the back room, if it's really a hard, specific question, then email. Okay, because calling is cumbersome. So send an email or a chat.
And you can always start with your ACR, which I'm right.
Okay.
Yeah. But
She just went up, she's like, oh, man, hi.
You can always, and
agents are, we have them split out. We have 3 ACRs and 4 TCs, and they're all split out between, yeah.
And the
agent
TC is the
one.
transaction coordinator.
Yeah,
And
so
the
ACR
I'm in charge of the girl.
What?
Agent care rep, yeah. And
That's
so
right.
basically your ACR is like kind of your front end person, like the first person that you'll talk, I mean, like that you'll have contact with on the, you know,
Oh.
staff wise, when you start anything.
That's
search,
actually a good
search,
point.
you know, sale, that. And then we take you through the process through the offer, and then once the offer is, you know, we've processed it all into our system, then the TC takes from there.
Okay.
So.
That's actually a good way of wording it, because on the front end of the deal, it's the ACR, so on the back end, it's the TC.
And they are gonna finish up these classes with their own processing classes, which are answer, so that's part of this, that's part of the
Yeah,
structure.
no.
Every agent does that. They
Yeah.
start and they're overwhelmed because you're trying to get all this stuff and then they're like, wait, what'd you say? What can you do?
And then
So,
Jeff brought up a good point.
Whatever you do very well. I just don't know who's doing great at
Well,
what.
and sometimes, you know, I mean, you might see in that, you know, another ACR cover, whatever, another TC cover, and they're like, oh, you know, just know that we all are equipped and we know what's going on with everything, so, you know, but.
Jeff brought up a good point, you know, that $290 buyer admin, brokerage administration fee at the bottom there. VA will not accept that. But we still need to collect it from the buyer. Okay, so we need to get that outside of closing, you put it on addendum. If you're working with the VA loan, they will not pay the $290. We want you guys to have that credit on your statement, and of course, we need the rest of that to help pay for your ACRs and your TCs and things like that, and keep the company running. So let's collect that outside of the VA, you know. Lance, on an addendum, we didn't put it on an addendum, or just an understanding, or what do we do?
Well, probably not on an addendum, because that's part of the purchase.
It's
So it
usually
has to
like
be-
an honor thing.
Has to be an honor
Between
thing,
you and the
you can do an agreement, but then it's between our company and the buyer.
So 290 made out to Remax Concepts, and then subject line, I would probably put the address of the house that's
It
being
is-
purchased.
Just so you know, it's in the agency agreement, and they do sign off on that they are going to pay $290. So,
it's just whether it's on the closing.
yeah,
Right.
it's just
Oh,
having
right.
them understand. So it's there.
It just can't be on the
It's
settlement
just, if
statement.
it's
It'll be
VA, you
outside.
gotta say.
Really?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I had a VA loan that.
No, it can't be. Not on a VA.
I know I got hit on it once, and he just reminded me, he just got hit on
I
it.
got hit on
I
it.
think it's just VA. I think FHA is allowed.
USDA.
It didn't used to.
USDA sometimes, depends on the interpretation.
Okay.
Pat, have you ever had a buyer want their inspection to come out on the closing disclosure?
Sure, I'm sorry.
Their inspection?
Sure, the lender can do it. It can
The
be done.
lender and the inspector, obviously.
Well, yeah, inspector's gotta wait, yeah.
Hey, listen, when you're putting a contract together, okay, it's not just the blanks that are there, it's not just the wording that's already there. If there's something, write it, put it in there.
That's what
It's
the other
better
provisions
there
is
than
for.
not knowing.
That's what the other provisions is for, is to put something aside from what's being identified. It's another provision of the
And if you run
contract.
out of room, you can use
Yeah.
the addendums,
Right.
AC addendums.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
And we're gonna go over those addendums versus amendments and how to use those next week, or 2 weeks from now. I hope everybody that's here is here 2 weeks from now. We got another bunch of information that's gonna help. Yeah.
Every 2 weeks, we're going over all the details.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. I'm not saying-
Well,